Welcome back, designers. It's day 2. Let's get into our art kits and see what tools we have, see what tools you might want to see if you can find around the house, and see if there might be something that you might have to make for yourself. So, our standard art kits, the ones that you hopefully would have taken home a couple days before the COVID quarantine set in, would be your sketchbook. Lots of blank pages in there yet. Toward the back of it, you've got your nice cutting boards somewhere in the front, right? Hopefully lots of good handouts, and our current unit, which would have been our drawings. We'll pause on that for a second and just take a look at, remind you guys what the rest of our tools look like. Something like a utility brush, at least half of an eraser is left, 3 pencils, an HB, a 2H, HB, a 6H, and a 4B, 2 pens. One of these is a rollerball tip, and one of them is a felt tip. We'll use these guys today in our drawing exercise. An X-Acto blade, and hopefully you grabbed a couple fresh blades, and hopefully you're not using that same blade that you started with. If all you have is one blade, you can just be really careful with it, but if you'd like to get a couple of replacements, I recommend purchasing the same exact blades that we have in there. It's called a number 11 blade. Typically the blades that I buy are manufactured by X-Acto, the company X-Acto, but the number 11 blade is what you're looking for. It's your most standard blade. These sorts of blades, or these sorts of tools, have all kinds of different blades that fit, and if you end up buying the wrong blade, it just won't work right for some of the processes that we're going to work on. But then the exciting thing was, I hooked you guys up with some extra materials. So let's take a look and see what's inside here. Break it down, make sure you guys have everything that you need. Some balsa wood strips, should be 4 of them taped together here, and then at the other end some coffee stirrers, which would be some scrap wood for us to work with there. Ball of fluff, and a strip of cotton fabric, should be folded up. A set of watercolors. Inside of there you should have one of these small precision brushes. We'll use this brush for more than just paints, but you can leave it in there for now. It's good enough. Ignore the names that are written all over the sides of these. They're basically brand new. Should be a film cartridge inside there somewhere, full of PVA glue. Be careful, it may have tipped over on its side while it was being stored and is likely sort of filling the cap and everything. Keep that cap tightly screwed down, otherwise that PVA glue will dry up in a hurry. Scrap of 150 grit sandpaper, 220 grit sandpaper. Scratchy on one side, smooth on the other. You guys should all have a brand new right triangle. We'll use this for a straight edge. You should have a set of pins. Now one of these is sort of an abnormal pin. It's actually a sewing needle. So 5 pins plus a sewing needle. Keep them stuck into this foam core because these things are incredibly easy to lose. Very tiny. You should have a bobbin, which is just this kind of spool looking thing full of thread. The thread I have in this kit is black. I bought black and white thread. Luck of the draw, guys. Inside of the bag you should have a couple of sheets of graph paper. It's actually semi-transparent graph paper. That's what they call like a vellum. Just kind of nice. And then a very nice piece of watercolor paper. If those got a little crinkled or they got wonky, press them with a couple books. See if you can't keep them nice and flat. We're going to set them aside and come back to them later. And each one of you guys should have gotten an oval template. 2 different styles went out. Some of them were these slightly bigger ovals. Some of them were these slightly smaller ovals. There's not going to be a real huge difference here, guys. You can accomplish just about anything. One of the things I was trying to get into all the kits, but I just didn't have enough, and I figured you guys could probably improvise, would be some circle templates. Now honestly, anything around the house that's circular will work as a circle template. The only nice thing about some of these drafting templates is that they have the exact diameters of the circles imprinted on the side. Now, if you are a very precise engineer-like drawer, you'll really like those, but I've got a technique that we can use that we don't really need such precise stuff here. I guess it just sort of depends on what you hope to be drawing. So that is the extent of what you guys have in the kits. A lot of what's in there we can just leave in there for right now, or if you want to kind of set it up in your studio somewhere nice. These bags were just some janitor's bags that I grabbed in a hurry as we were all getting kicked out of school. So if they fall apart on you, just kind of set them up on the desk. I would recommend, though, stand this guy up vertically somewhere so that it doesn't constantly spill into the lid. Today, though, what I want you guys to actually begin working on, or I should say maybe pick up working on, would be your drawings. Now we're going to come back to these drawings. I'm going to do a quick refresher here to just sort of recap where we've been and what we've already worked on, and then give you guys something to actually work on today. So now these are actually printouts of some drawings that I did on the board, but I'll be doing some actual drawing demonstrations as well. So we did a full page of what we'll call distorted planes. This was the day that we talked about what could you do with a piece of paper: bend it, fold it, rip it, tear it. We also did a full page of what I called transformations, where we went from two-dimensional shapes to three-dimensional forms to clusters of those forms. This is all stuff that you guys should have completed, but I'm just doing a quick refresher here for you. Right? Once we have these three-dimensional forms, we did full pages of cuts. Now, this was the day where we started by actually working with a bit of clay. We rolled out some forms, or shaped some forms, and then sliced them, and then rearranged them to kind of help draw. And that's about where we left off. We just barely scratched the surface of what we can really do with some of these forms, and I don't know that many of you carry these forms home with you. And so what we'll do is we will improvise with a few things we find around the house. But if you happen to have your clay forms, this can be sort of a really handy ongoing source of drawing exercise. This is particularly true if you held on to one of yours and it's now at a point where you can break it. This dry mud breaks really nicely, and this makes for a much more interesting drawing, imagining how these might fit back together than some of our simple forms. So we maybe come back to these clay forms a little bit. The very last thing we were working on right before we left were these template drawings. And this is what I want to pick up with today. I would like each one of you guys to demonstrate for me that you've at least made an attempt at a more precise form within a form. I'll demonstrate a couple different examples today, something like a cylinder, cracking a cylinder open and seeing something inside, a sphere, and then something that's a bit more freehand. So you will need your templates and a straight edge. I'm going to work with a little bit darker pencil and a pen so that you can sort of see what I'm working on. So I'll probably go HB with my pencil, and then I'll work back over it with the pen. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to work with my templates here, my circle templates and my oval templates. If you don't have some circle templates, you can just find some stuff around the house. Do your best to match the diameter of your circle to the diameter of the oval that you choose. So whatever you find around the house, whether it's a milk bottle cap or something like that, see if you can't match it to the diameter of one of these just by holding it up to the outside. The closer it is to a complete match, edge to edge, the more accurate it will look. So I'm going to use on my grid here, what do we got? 1.5 inch circle. That sounds good. So I'll start by rendering out a 1.5 inch circle. that's showing up pretty good in the video. Now, the templates typically have little tick marks around the outsides. I am going to use those tick marks now to mark the top centers, the bottom centers, and the sides. Then I'll bring in my straight edge, and my straight edge will just kind of lay in an axis cutting through. This is just going to help with the alignment of other layers as I put them around the outside. So that outer circle is going to kind of be the outer shell, and then I'm just going to make, let's see, I'll make an off-centered inner circle. Now this, you guys could make it perfectly centered by using your center lines, using the grid lines that you've drawn. I'm going to do a slightly off-centered circle here. That is going to be the sphere that is inside the initial circle. And now all the rest of my drawing should be able to be done with my oval template. So my first oval here, I'm going to perfectly line up with my grid lines. And don't be surprised if as you're lining up your ovals, it looks like your oval template is sort of overshooting the edge of your circle. Remember, at the tip of your pencil is fairly wide, and so when you draw an oval in, it actually will line right up on the edge of that circle. So some of you guys are now already starting to kind of see the sort of like three-dimensional feel of this drawing, but I'm going to keep going here with a couple of other ovals. This oval is going to be sort of a diagonal cut, and something like that. So I'll use these two ovals that I've drawn. I'm not going to get too complicated at this one, and black in using a pen this time the areas essentially that I would keep. Ideally, I think when you guys draw yours, if you use a 6H pencil, you won't have such dark pencil lines, but let's see how this goes. I'll come in with my 1.5 inch oval. And now I'm carefully rendering in black only the areas that I know that I'm going to keep. Another way of thinking about this would be I'm rendering in the areas that I can see. You have to sort of imagine which parts of these circles would be hidden or obscured by the solid forms. Sort of like this sideways, these two sideways wedge-shaped shells around the outside. So I'm going to render it in. Okay, so now these two outer shells I'm going to keep. Now I'm going to draw that inner circle again. I forget what the diameter was, so I have to kind of test through all of my different sizes. Here we go. Okay, so this part of the circle is visible on the inside, and this part of the circle is visible. So it's kind of starting to come together here. What I could do, because my initial lines are so dark, is I could lay in a little bit of sort of a shadow where the inside of the sphere or the inside of the shell would be exposed. That way it starts to sort of sell the illusion just a little bit more. Okay, so we can kind of keep playing with this a little bit. I'm going to use my other oval template. For those of you guys who are still working here with maybe a slightly larger one. And I'm going to work with cylinder this time. And I want you to kind of keep in mind, you know, what it might look like to render out this broken cylinder, broken at an angle. And I think I'm going to keep on coming back to that idea, but imagine, right, that instead of the broken end of the cylinder, I'll be kind of staring at a cross section, and the cross section of a cylinder should be an ellipse. So if I work with, let's just work with this one here. I'm going to just kind of make my center line here. That way I can easily follow. My cylinder will be straight. Front end of the cylinder, 1 1/4. I'm just going to scoot that guy all the way back, and the back end of the cylinder. Now, so maybe some of you guys are starting to kind of get this visual already, but I'm going to connect these top sides, just the very tip tops of the ovals here. And if I was really truly seeing a cylinder here, I would not have both ends exposed simultaneously. I would only see 1/2 of the top or bottom end. So I'm going to imagine that my cylinder has a face exposed here and just an end exposed here. Okay, so you could imagine that this line, for example, then I'll just lighten it up a little bit with my eraser. It's looking pretty dark in the video. This end, right, I only get to see about half that. So what if, you know, what if I'm just kind of trying to freehand a few things out. What if I wanted to kind of work with some curves? And here's maybe where you don't really need quite such a precise measurement on some of these circles. But what if I was looking for a form that was a little more organic? Just kind of rendering one out here. Something almost fish-like. I could bring my ovals in and sort of space out my drawing a bit more. So I'll lay in one here, perform another edge here, and here will be a face. And as my form is getting smaller and smaller, my ovals have to get smaller and smaller. Just kind of quickly render this in for you. Some of you are already starting to kind of see that this may, you know, be an open face here. Here would be an inside and an inside. This can be kind of a really handy way for oval templates to sort of clean up some freehand drawings that otherwise might be a little bit tricky to sort of perfectly render out those ellipses. However you approach this project, either with a lot of extra precision or just kind of using the ellipses to clean up some of your drawings, I would like for you to give me one filler page exposing and cutting and opening forms using the oval templates that are in your kit.